This video is designed to help you a little bit with factoring, and then also for those of you that need to redo the Distant Learning Day 10 assignment. Alright, so the key to doing all this is factoring each of the expressions. And remember, our steps in factoring are step 1, take out the greatest common factor. Step 2, look for difference of squares, or a PST. And step 3, trial and error. And I know a lot of you are completing this and you're doing it using grouping and so on, which is a little more complicated, takes more steps. So I encourage you to just follow the example. I think a lot of you can just do this mentally, and you can do it much quicker than using the method. I know photo math uses the method of grouping and so on, but I don't think that's needed. So for example, to do this first one, I would factor this. We're looking at this numerator. There's no greatest common factor. It's not difference of squares. It's not a perfect square trinomial. So trial and error. I have x squared, so I need x and x. Then I look at the negative 24. I got to have factors of 24, but I got to get a positive 5x. So factors of 24 are like 2 and 12, 3 and 8. 3 and 8 is going to work. And I need a positive 8 and a minus 3. The x squared minus 6x minus 7, again, it's not a difference of squares or PST. There's no greatest common factor. So by trial and error of x and x, I look at my factors of a negative 7. My only factors of 7 are 7 and 1. I need a negative 7, positive 1. Everything else is x plus 1 is completely factored, and the x minus 3 is. So now I can simplify and cross cancel. So the x minus 3's would cancel. The x plus 1's would cancel. My final answer is x plus 8 times x minus 7. No need to multiply those together. Just leave it in factored form. This is an acceptable answer. The next example is a division problem. So remember, we're going to flip and multiply. So first of all, looking at the first numerator here, there's no greatest common factor. This appears to be perfect square trinomial because of the 16 and the 25. If it is, it'd be 4x and 4x. Both signs are positive, 5 and 5. And that does work. The bottom, there's no greatest common factor. It's not a perfect square trinomial. I'd start with 3x and x. Factors of negative 8 now, and I got to try to get a negative 10. I could use 1 and 8, 2 and 4. If I put the 4 here, that gives me 12. 2 there, that gives me 2. That's going to work if the 12 is negative and the 2 is positive. The second one, remember, I'm going to flip, so I'm going to bring the 4x plus 5 down to the bottom. I'm moving the denominator up, and this appears to be a perfect square trinomial. X and x. In this case, both signs would be negative, 4 and 4. And it does work. Now, since I flipped it, this becomes a multiplication. And now I can cross cancel. X minus 4's are gone. 4x plus 5's are gone. That's it. And I just leave my answer as 4x plus 5 times x minus 4 all over 3x plus 2. And that's it. Number 3 is a addition and subtraction one. Remember, on these we need to have a least common denominator. In this example, the 3, the 2, and the 6 have a least common multiple of 6. The greatest power of x that I have is x squared, and the greatest power of y I have is y squared. Alright, so then, and this is the method I've asked some of you to redo your problem and to show this, So therefore this first fraction I'm going to be multiplying by 2xy squared, because I got to make the bottom 6x squared y squared. The middle one I'd have to multiply by a 3y squared. And the last one needs an x. So then I just keep that denominator. Multiplying on the top, I'd have 6xy squared plus 6y to the third minus 7x. And some of you asked the question, do I need to do anything more? No, it's a good question, but the top of this, there are no like terms. So nothing can be combined, and that would be your answer. This fourth one, we need to completely factor everything on the bottom. So this one here, greatest common factor, I could take a 2 out, leaves me with x minus 6. This one is not a greatest common factor. It's not a perfect square trinomial. I'm going to start with x and x. Factors of 12, I got to get a negative 4. Use 6 and 2, so minus 6 plus 2. So therefore, my least common denominator would be the 2 times x minus 6 times x plus 2. So to make each of these the same, this first one needs an x plus 2. The second one needs a 2. And then I would simply keep your denominator the same. On the top I would have 3x plus 6. And this is very important. This minus here gets carried through. So I would change it to adding the opposite, make that a negative 10. So it ends up being a negative 20. Then combine like terms, you'd have 3x minus 14. And again, just leave the denominator the way it is, factored out. So I hope this helps. I hope that you realize that trial and error is probably a quicker and more efficient method of that. Again, to get better or more fluent at using trial and error, you just have to practice it. So use this to make some corrections on yesterday's assignment to do it using this method.